Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to our Friday Inspirational Talk. And we say it out loud because these are works of the good that we're doing together. Yes, we're together, strengthening ourselves, empowering one another, and reaching out into worlds because those who are with us will benefit. The neighbors, our whole spiritual network. And imagine from that network to their networks and its domino effect. Then the whole earth is inspired. And today, it's the foundation of it all. God, good, evil. What are the questions that you may have? What are the questions? Where does evil begin, right? Is it a curse? Why are some people more affected by that and not others? How do we understand it? Spiritism has answers. The reasoning easily follow through. It's no dogma. There are no dogmas in Spiritism. And today, we're going to open the path to Kardec's books, to the Genesis, a book that was brought by Kardec and his amazing efforts at his time in 1868. And to date, that book is still changing lives. We have a lot to learn, but let us begin with our login, the message and the prayer. We were saying to friends the other day, when we read an inspirational message and we pray, it's as if you are entering a very important account, YouTube. And I say this because sometimes you have a two-step verification, which nobody likes, but it's important for safety. And when we read a message, when we do the prayer, it's what we're doing, logging in the account of the good, the constructive mental current. Once we're there, we're there. All right? Are you ready, friends? Friends are coming in, and we're ready for Camila, who is here with us. Right, Camila?
That's right, Vanessa. Hello, friends, and welcome. Tonight, we will read a message called Regarding Books. It is from the book Conduta Espírita by the Spirit André Luiz and psychographed by Valdo Vieira. And it goes like this. Devote a few minutes each day to reading edifying works, leaving aside the book of inferior nature. Above all, prefer the books that can nourish your soul, which address fundamental themes of the Spiritist doctrine. When light is absent, darkness is present. Digest the fundamental works of Spiritism prior to engaging in practice, specifically with regard to mediumship. Meditating upon theory assures safe action. During your available time, research the works gathered in the library of the temple or center to which you belong. Reading books renews ideas. Appreciate with compassion the works that combat Spiritism, understanding their meaning while silencing premeditated or passionate defenses. Gather from these works cautions and warnings intended to improve the work for which you are responsible. The good utilizes evil to make itself greater. Offer Spiritist works to friends, including those books that are becoming moldy without being put to use in the home. Choose the kind and type of literature that can offer your friends instruction and consolation. Noble books are path to ascension. Discipline yourself while reading with respect to your schedule and the annotations you make. This will allow you to better take advantage of your studies and to better learn without tiring yourself from repetition. Those who learn more study better. Without excluding authors or themes, thoroughly analyze the works you read so that you will not stagnate your own inner self within toxic and false precipice of intellectualism, such within literally absurdities that revolve around unhealthy or senseless conversations. Good and bad thoughts can emerge from the same letter and words. Disseminate by all lawful means the books that clarify the Spiritist postulates, honoring sanctifying works aimed to admitting humanity to the pathway of redemption with Jesus. A Spiritist library is a refuge of light. Test everything. Hold fast what is good. Thank you.
Vanessa, we cannot hear you.
Oh, all right. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Carol.
Of
All
course.
right. Somewhat, I touched the microphone. Okay, so we're back. Thank you. So here we are, friends. We are in this next step, the step of logging into the account of the good spirits. They love us. They are sent by God to help us. So all we need to do is to open our hearts, open our homes. Let us feel the vibrations of the good spirits with us, who love us so dearly. I'm opening here the very music. We don't need, some people ask me, do I need music to pray? No. But if you want to play some music that makes you feel more elevated and inspired, it's not going to hurt. It's going to help. All right? So here we are with some background music to make us feel how we are so loved, protected, and guided. Dear Mother, Father God, we feel your protection, your guidance asking us to open ourselves to love. As a good friend said to us this morning, love is in the air because you are everywhere. So we have no reason to fear anything. We have no reason to doubt or to feel hatred because you are taking care of everything and everyone. Your justice is so loving and compassionate that you allow us to make choices and you give us opportunities to make adjustments regarding those choices. Thank you for another day in which you allow us to gather together. May the vibrations that we are here building, co-creating with you, spread out multiplying in benefits to many who are in the hospitals, whether working or receiving treatments. May they feel new waves of hope. May they feel safe, loved, cared for. We pray for those who are in nursing homes and long for a hug, for conversations with friends and family. May those who work therein and those who live there feel how much you love them. We visualize prisons being enveloped by your mercy, for they are already going through their moment of atonement. We visualize our whole planet balanced in your loving light, counterbalancing our misdeeds. And today, God, we want to understand you more, feel you, and understand this thing about good and evil. We can clearly see them both in us and around us. May Spiritism today be an opportunity through which we expand our understanding of our foundation in the good and its temporary absence, evil. With your permission and your guidance, feeling your protection, we begin this moment of togetherness in the good, and so be it. It feels good. We're almost gonna sing. I feel good, right? This. I feel good. Just that. But we're gonna talk about God, good and evil. But before that, Daisy is going to bring the Spirit's book moment, right, Daisy?
That's right, Vanessa. So, friends, as we just read this beautiful message about books, oh my gosh, books are so precious, and Spirit's books, wow. So, if you can have this book at home, or you can get it, nowadays through the internet, have it on your phone. It's so beautiful because you can go there, as we will do today, and just one question, we can keep that in the back of our minds and reflect on it throughout the day. So tonight, we're going to continue in the fourth part of the Spirit's book, chapter 1, where we're talking about relative happiness and unhappiness. So, the question tonight that Kardec brings to us is talking about misfortunes. So, he says, question 924, there are misfortunes which do not depend on the way we act or which harm the most righteous people. Isn't there a way to keep ourselves from such misfortunes? So he's asking, is there a way for us to keep ourselves from misfortunes? And so interesting, because from everything that the spirits could tell us, this is their recommendation. If we want to progress, so do we all want to progress? I think we all want to progress, right? What we should do? We must resign ourselves and endure misfortunes without complaining. However, you will always find consolation within your own conscience, which gives you the hope of a better future, provided you do what is needed to obtain it. So, the high spirits are telling us in order for us to progress, we need resignation. That's the very first thing. We need to resign ourselves, as we'll see today when we talk about God, good and evil. So, God loves us and He is directing our lives. So, we resign ourselves, putting God's first, and we endure our misfortunes without complaining. Such an important reminder for all of us to really continue on this pathway without complaining, without putting ourselves as victims. As we know in Spiritism, there's no victims, it's just an educational journey. And they finalize by saying, if we find consolation within our own conscience, because we know if we're fulfilling God's law, if we are doing what's right, although we will be going through difficult times in our lives, we will be with that clear conscience. So the two words here for us tonight, resignation and no complaining. That's our Spiritus Book moment.
Thank you so much. We see in that message how God is so just that there's nothing that happens with us without his permission, right? God is not sadistic, allowing us to go through experiences that we don't need. So there's always something good on it. We need to meditate. To meditate on this, right, Daisy and Carol, we're going to march towards a beautiful journey. Today, we're going to go to the book Genesis, mostly, not only, but mostly, by Kardec. In that book, we are going to find Kardec in chapter 2, talking about God. He begins, this is just a teaser for us, because we need reflection. It's not about, oh, the knowledge for knowledge, because knowledge you and I have somewhat in that regard, right? We know that God, he says, since God is the first cause of all things, the point of departure for everything and the foundation upon which the edifice of creation rests, God is the subject that we must consider before anything else. Before we pass the word to our friends who are here going to share in details how Spiritism can bring more information, we're going to ask ourselves. And at the very end, we're going to do a test together. It's a mini quiz. But we're going to begin with one major question. Do we consider God in our lives before anything else? For example, do we think, oh God, I want to do grocery shopping now? What do you think? And people may say, but Vanessa, that's weird. You would ask God before you go do grocery shopping. Of course, because he's giving me life. I'm not on my own. As I said, you're putting fuel on me. Do you think if I spend that energy going to do this is good? Oh, does it mean I need to ask God about anything? I don't know. Look at Jesus. He's the governor of the planet. He came here and he was always saying, oh God. He was always chatting with God. Throughout the scriptures, we're going to see Jesus having dialogues with God, always referring to God, always. And we who are not the governor of the planet, probably we barely do that. So you see the foundational issue here in our lives? But let's understand more as Carol now is going to lead us into the Spiritist view of God, God's providence, and where is God in our lives, because that may change our lives forever. right, Carol?
In fact, Vanessa, this is one of the very questions we have prepared to ask ourselves. So this is going to be a beautiful warm-up to the quiz at the end of tonight's session. So, dear friends, the purpose of our journey tonight, one of the purposes is for us to see if we are able to feel God and to understand where we are in terms of also feeling the presence of divine providence in our lives. So let us begin inspired by the very work of Allan Kardec in the book The Genesis. As Vanessa mentioned, we are going to focus our attention specifically on chapter 2, and then to further illustrate divine providence in action, we are going to refer to the book 50 years later by Emmanuel through the mediumship of Chico Xavier. So let us begin our journey tonight, dear friends. Our first question as a warm-up to our quiz later on tonight is as follows, dear friends. Where do we currently perceive God's presence in our lives? In other words, where is God in our lives? The very question that Vanessa already posed to us. When we were growing up, dear friends, there was a children's book named Where's Waldo? And the challenge for us would be to find this character named Waldo in every page of the book. And there were many visual distractions there present for us as children to challenge ourselves and feel excited as we pursued success. We confess, dear friends, that we ourselves sometimes had to use a magnifying glass to find Waldo because we were not able to find Waldo with our very own naked eyes. So the question for us, similarly to that child's game, is where is God in our lives? If we had to place God within the pages of the book of this current incarnation, since we know that our incarnation is registered in the recesses of our consciousness forever, and every day is a new page in the book of life, we ask ourselves, where is God in the book of our lives? Is God present in the pages of the book of our lives as an authoritarian God that sits on a throne, that looks very powerful and points fingers at us? Is this the God we perceive? And by the same token, are we in a position emotionally and spiritually at the moment whereby we also point fingers at God, saying, God, this is in our wish list. Can you give us this, and this, and that? Do we treat God, perchance, dear friends, as God Dash? We have the service named DoorDash in the United States, and when we would like to have some meals, we can order it by phone. Do we consider God our God Dash? Because when we want to nourish ourselves, we enter our order and therefore expect God to deliver at our door, at the door of our souls? Is this how we perceive God? Or do we have a different perception of God through which we see God everywhere? We feel that God's presence permeates everything. Where are we, dear friends? Let us feel the scriptures and go inside of ourselves in order to realize where we are. Let us then continue our journey. Our next question for our reflection is, what is the type of relationship that we currently have with God? If we adopt the God dash approach to God, where God is circulating around us, God is peripheral to our lives, we may not have all of our whims and expectations fulfilled, and thus we may feel like a flower in the midst of an arid desert. We may feel that we lack. On the other hand, if we perceive God as the ultimate creator of all things, including ourselves, we then do not see any separation between ourselves and God, our loved ones and God, nature and God, and thus, because we feel immersed in God, we have a sense of abundance, because God is omnipresent and all-loving and just. So where are we in this relationship? What type of relationship are we nourishing with God? The type in which we expect to only receive as God, quote unquote, takes our orders, or one in which we commune with God because God is everywhere. According to the Spiritist understanding of God, dear friends, as reported in the book The Genesis, we at times in our lives, depending on our level of evolution, we may not yet be able to fully see God's presence in our lives because we are still in need of spiritualizing ourselves. In the book The Genesis, Kardec and the higher spirits tell us that we will see God's presence in our lives when we rid ourselves of our moral veils, of our tendencies that weigh us down and obscure our vision. Once we work towards our own spiritual betterment, then the veil will lift and God will shine towards us and within us, even on the earth, say the illuminated spirits. And here's a revelation for us yet again, as Vanessa mentioned, because God is everywhere. And the next question then is, since God is everywhere, according to the higher minds, how can we feel God's presence in our lives? And the higher spirits explain to us, we can feel God's presence because God is like akin to an intelligent fluid, feeling the infinite universe. The higher spirits explain to us that the whole of nature and creation is immersed in this divine fluid. Everything is subject to its intelligent action, its foresight, and its solicitude. They further explain to us that there's not one being, no matter how minuscule they may be, that is not saturated with this fluid. Our thought, say the spirit mentors, is in constant contact with its thought. Our thoughts resound within God. And we are in God, therefore, as in God is in us. The Spirit mentors further explain that when we pray, as we just did, we don't have to go to God, because it is as if our feelings, thoughts, and intentions were already resounding inside of God. How beautiful it is to know, dear friends, that we are literally immersed in God's love. How does that change our perception of God, dear friends? The Spirit mentors in the book The Genesis by Kardec tell us that God's presence is like the sun. Even if there are clouds obscuring our vision, we can feel its warmth, its all-encompassing embrace. So we hope that we feel empowered by knowing that divine providence is our guiding light, that we are immersed in God. And to illustrate how this understanding of God as ever present in our lives can influence our existence on the earth, we are going to bring to our attention and reflection the case of Celia from the book 50 Years Later, psychographed by Emmanuel through Chico Xavier. So to explain, dear friends, Celia was incarnated 2,000 years ago when it was considered to be a crime to embrace the Christ consciousness. She, a very well-to-do Roman, because of her faith, decided to take in a child who was not hers to protect her own mother from slander, not fearing being homeless, not fearing being considered a criminal, not fearing being judged by an entire society at the time. She held to her faith in the Christ like a rock, and when she did become homeless and could find nothing but a cave to shelter herself and the newborn baby in, she prays because she trusts that when the entire world pushes her aside, God shall provide. She believed that she was immersed in God's thoughts. So literally in darkness, she turns on an inner light, the light of prayer. As Vanessa explained in the beginning, and as we learned from the book of Genesis, when we pray, our words resound in God. So of course her prayer was answered. And the spirit of her grandfather guided her, telling her that she was being watched by the loving messengers of God. So though the whole world didn't accept her, and she had to even disguise herself as a man later on in her journey, because women were not respected at the time, she took on this identity without losing faith. And yet again, as we see in the picture, she suffered slandered. She was accused of being the father of a rejected baby. She, as our dear Daisy showcased in the question read from the Spirit's book, she practiced resignation and acceptance of God's will. Instead of cursing God and asking God, why us, why me? She embraced the challenge, looking for the good in it, And she not only helped that child, but many children in the community around the village where she was without losing faith. Later on, dear friends, she encounters her father who expelled her from home and considered her to be morally dead to him. She encounters him again in the position of a Christian man as she disguised herself. And her father was so impressed with this man's teachings that he decided to change his life around and become a Christian himself. So we see that in this journey, Celia, though she was the only source of Christian light, Christ consciousness in that home, because of her perseverance, because of her abnegation, because of her courage, because of her faith, because of her sense of hope and trust in divine providence, that little light spread all around her family. And her father, as well as her mother, her grandfather, opened their hearts to the Christ consciousness because she chose to be a living example of God in others' lives and her own as well. As she became the guiding post of that family and set living examples to us and to humanity in centuries to come, she then becomes the GPS, the spiritual GPS for that whole family as she migrates to another planet more elevated. She still descends back to illuminate that family in their upcoming journeys in life. So we see, dear friends, before we pass the word to our dear Daisy, who will tell us more about the good in us. We see here, dear friends, that Celia, because she made one decision to believe in God, and because she daily, through the smallest tasks, chatted with God, as Vanessa mentioned before, she became a guiding light. She became the signal. She became a reference to her family and then to us as well and many generations to come. So with one daily decision, with illuminating our smallest steps, we too can become an instrument of God on the earth because we are in God and God is in us, dear friends. So now we will continue our journey tonight with our dear Daisy.
Thank you so much, Carol. So now we're gonna continue as we are discussing God's providence in good and evil in our lives. So we're gonna continue studying the Genesis and we're gonna bring a few other books for us to reflect. But in this question, the good versus the evil, as we're going through nowadays so many changes in our planet, and we can see clearly what is truly the good and the evil. It's like in this picture is really coming to the surface for us to distinguish, which is a characteristic as we're marching towards a planet of regeneration. So in chapter 3 of the Genesis, Kardec starts this chapter talking about good and evil by referring to God, as Carol just described it to us. God is infinitely wise, just, and good. So if God is infinitely good, he cannot produce anything that's weak or wrong. So God doesn't create evil, that's would go in the opposite direction of what we know God. God is infinitely good. So where does evil comes from, right? That would be our question. So if we go to the Spirit's books, to question 630, we complement what is in the Genesis, which is beautiful, how all the books by Kardec, they really complement each other. And there, Kardec described to us that good is everything that's in harmony with God's law. Whether evil is everything that deviates from it. So evil, in other words, is just the absence of the good temporarily. So evil is just an illusion. It's like the shadow, as the mentors of the SSVA always bring to us this beautiful reflection for us. The shadow, what is there? Is the absence of the light, right? So evil is temporarily the absence of the light. And how do we measure it? Anything that is not in harmony with God's law, because good conform with God's law, while doing evil infringes it. So if we want to know if what we're doing is good or evil, we need to think what I'm doing, does it conforms with God's law? And how can we know? Well, let's go back. We go back to the Spirit's book, because that's exactly the question that Kardec asked. And that's why we can go there and read about God's law, because Kardec asked these questions, and the Spirit says, well, the law is in our conscious. It's within, it's built in within ourselves. But sometimes what we do, we push it aside, we ignore it, right? We don't really look at it. It's like when we're driving and we know the speed limit is 20, but we say, no, you know what? I'm going to go 35 and 40. So we know the law, but we decide, it's our choice, right? So then Kardec continues talking about evil, and he says, very interesting for our reflection as we are going through a time of much pain in the planet. And he says, the evils to which men are exposed by ignorance are a stimulant for the exercise of their intelligence, for all their moral and physical faculties, by inducing them to seek for the means to shelter themselves from them. In other words, he summarized by saying, pain and suffering are incentives which spur men onward in the march of progress. So as we go through our lives and we encounter pain and suffering, he's saying is an incentive for us to progress. So it brings us, Spiritism brings us a different lens. As we talk about evil, as we go through pain and suffering in our lives, we are seeing that from the questions in the Spirit's book to the Genesis and so many other books, we see that it's showing to us that if we wanted to progress, we have a choice, we have free will. We can adhere to God's law, or if we infringe it, well, there's a law, like the ticket, right? The speeding ticket, where we know we're going above the speed limit, we'll get a ticket. So that's what will happen as we go through our lives. And they continue by explaining, so what is truly, where does evil comes from? Well, the most numerous evils are those which man create, not God. Men, all of us, we create by what? By our vices, by our choices that are built on what? On pride, on selfishness, ambition, cupidity, the excesses of all things. And here he's referring to excesses that we see not the excesses of the spiritual, but of the material things. So man creates evil and is built in through this pride. So what is the consequence? The consequence, Kardec explained on the Genesis, is wars, is calamities, injustice, oppression of the feeble by the strong, and what? The greater part of the disease. So reflection for us as we're going through a pandemic, a global pandemic, where does this comes from? Did God create the pandemic? A lot of people ask that, right? Did God create it? Well, it is the byproduct of our choices as a society, as humanity, because God gave us free will. But then what? We need to march forward and accept the consequences. So it is evil comes from our pride. So what can we do? If we know where evil comes from, then Kardec says, if man conform rigorously to the divine laws, he would evade without doubt the severest evil and will live happily on earth. So when are we going to live happily? When we conform with God's laws. Going back to what we're saying, we need to make choices in our daily lives that conforms with God's law. But then you might be thinking, well, but I don't do any evil in my life. I don't go around, I don't kill anyone. I am going through my daily lives, right? I don't commit any evil. So that is exactly the question that Kardec asked, 642 in the Spirit's book. He asked, well, in order to please God and ensure a future situation, is it enough simply not to do what is evil? Is it enough? Do you think it's enough? It's like, I'm not committing any evil, so is that enough for us? This is such an interesting answer because the Spirit says, no, it's not enough. All must do good to the best of their abilities, for all will answer for all the evil that resulted from the good that they left undone. Wow. Let's take a deep breath because that is a lot for us, right? It is a lot to take in when we say, wow, so does that mean I need to constantly do the good? And that's a reminder for myself too. Yes, it's not enough for us to simply not do evil, because the evil that resulted from the good that we left undone, we would be responsible. Is what we always bring, these mentors always bring us this very simple analogy, let's say this way, is when we see the banana skin on the road, on the sidewalk, and we look at it and we are like, wasn't me, I didn't, I wasn't the one eating the banana and I didn't throw it on the ground. So, I'm not going to pick it up, and we just pass it around, right? So we're thinking in our minds, we're not doing any evil. But how about that person that comes right after us and steps on that banana skin and falls? And what if it is one of our loved ones, or irregardless of who it is? So the evil that resulted from that one simple action that we left undone, we're gonna be correspondent. So we need to reflect on this. And then he says in this final part of this first part of chapter 3, says, God, full of goodness, has placed the remedy by the side of the evil. So God give us the remedy. That is to say, he brings the good out of its opposite. There comes a time where an excess of moral weakness become intolerable and makes a man realize the need of a change of life. So all of us, friends, because we're not doomed to be evil, to be wicked, to suffer. On the contrary, God is full of goodness. So there will be a time, all of us, we will get sick of infringing God's law, and we will march forward. But then let us ask ourselves, are we going to wait for the hardest pains and trials in our lives to push us forward to do the good? Or are we going to take it and we will make the decision ourselves? So to illustrate this good and evil, we want to bring the beautiful case of Paul Tarsus, Saul who became Paul. In this book that we would strongly recommend, give it as a present, read, listen to it, reread, because it's so beautiful. And don't feel discouraged by the size, because it's once you start, you're not going to be able to put it down. So there's so much for us that this book brings so many lessons. But tonight we're going to focus on the story of Saul who became Paul. The story of this apostle, this disciple of Jesus, but who was, before he became Paul, who was Saul? As we see here on the screen, as we look at this picture, the Pharisees at the time, thinking that they were doing the good, right? Because they, in their eyes, thought that they knew the law. They were following the Mosaic law. And who were the Christians? Who were they to say that they knew better? So, as we saw right after Jesus, the persecutions happened to the Christians at the time. Saul was there. He was the Pharisee, and he was leading the persecutions. He personally signed, quote unquote, right? He personally signed under the persecutions of the Christians at the time, as we seen in this beautiful projeto imagem of this book. So, but he thought, in his eyes, he wasn't committing evil. He was following the law. But when we look with the Spiritist lenses and we see the actions of Paul, we see what we described earlier, that pride inside of him of we are better, we know better, right? Not the sentiment that Christ brought, that we're all brothers and sisters, that we're all equal. So Paul personally persecuted the Christians, and one of them was Stephen. Stephen, someone who went from being a very simple and humble farmer, but who grew up with the same, knowing the same Mosaic laws that Paul's did. But interesting enough, Stephen, knowing the same things, he was already meek. He has his family lost everything and he went to be a slave. He already had, without knowing Christ, the Christian trademarks. It was already, even though he at the time didn't know Christ. But as Stephen went through slavery and then was able to have the opportunity to start over, and he was embraced by the mention of the way, the disciples at the time, and he got to know about Jesus' teachings. Because he already had those trademarks, he accepted very easily. But Saul, he didn't see the same way. Who was Stephen to be, even when in the book has it described passages of the encounter of the two, he couldn't understand how Stephen could be so meek, but still have so much conviction, so much past, so much the teachings of Christ in a way that he saw at the time, felt that is something different about him. He couldn't really pin it. But he followed through with the persecutions. And on the day of Stephen's death, he was there with his fiancée. In the day that he thought that, wow, it's the top of my quote unquote career. I'm there, this is the biggest achievement. I am coming through and bringing my fiancé to really show. And as they are there, something happens that changed his life forever, because the one that he loved the most, his fiancé, looks at Stephen and says, that is my brother. That is my brother there who you're persecuting. And then we would say, in one of the most beautiful passages, because there's so many of this book, and I'm just going to read an excerpt for us, because as Paul look in this scenery that is happening, he persecuting Stephen, finding out that he's the brother of his loved one, and he's like, that this the day that could be the happiest of day. Now what people gonna say? He's your brother. And Stephen dying, looking at him. Emmanuel describes the dying man looked at him without hate. He was just persecuted. He was just stoned to death. And Stephen was still loving and meek and humble. He says, Stephen, may God bless you both. To Saul and his sister, he says, your beloved is not my enemy, but a brother. Saul must be good and generous. He defended Moses to the end. When he meets Jesus, he will serve him with the same zeal, be a loving and faithful companion to him. Stephen's compassion, the fruit of peace that Saul had never known, in the imminence of worldly status, it struck him profoundly. He could not explain it, but the dying man's resignation and gentleness were assailing his hardened heart. Right here is the first trait, that Stephen's goodness, his meekness, struck like a lighthouse in the ocean that shines light. Stephen was there. He was shining his light and guiding Saul. And from this day forward, the story continues. And we know that Saul's life wasn't the same anymore. He then has the beautiful encounter with Jesus in the road to Damascus, as he was already conflicted. Who was this Christ who came and described this gentleness, this humbleness shown in Stephen's? And from this day forward, he decided that he will no longer be Saul Tarsus, but Paul. But how come, right, friends, as we're talking about good and evil, this man who spent half of his life persecuting Christians, focused so much evil, how could that transformation happen? But it's to illustrate to us that we all have this goodness inside of us. We're not doomed, as so Paul showed to us. We're not doomed to continue on this pathway. But was it easy for him? We know it wasn't easy. As Emmanuel says in the preface of the book, that his figure, this worker, he was transformed by Jesus and by his divine ministry. But Jesus' declaration regarding the suffering that awaited him for the love of his name. And then Emmanuel describes saying that he heard the call. He heard the call, Paul. He repented. He denied himself. He took his cross and he followed Jesus. Amid persecutions, infirmities, derisions, mockery, delusion, desertions, stonings, beatings, and imprisonment, Paul of Tarsus was a courageous and sincere man walking in the darkness of the world to meet the Master who made himself heard at the crossroads of his life. That is us, friends, in the crossroads, in the road of Damascus, choosing good versus evil. It is an opportunity. And not only for us to choose the good, but to be this lighthouse, because throughout Paul's transformation, who was beside him? Is Stephen, the person who he persecuted, who he ordered the stonings. Stephen was this beaming light. So we not only make choices for ourselves, but we are like the lighthouse. We're guiding others who are coming beside us. It comes after us. So the choices that we make are gonna guide those. So has Stephen guided Paul throughout the way through his teachings of the gospel? Paul took in because he knew that he wasn't doomed by his choices, that good would prevail. And it did, friends, because the book ends by describing the beautiful encounter after his discarnation, not only with Stephen, Abigail, the love of his life, but Jesus. Jesus himself, has he decided to transform. So tonight we end by reminding us that evil is just the absence of the good. God is infinite goodness. So evil is just temporarily the absence of the good. But how do we do it? How do we choose the good? By following God's law. As we make our daily choices, not being enough to just not doing evil, but to doing the good in all circumstances of our lives. And knowing that, as Paul illustrated to us, we're not doomed to suffer, we're not doomed to this evil if we choose the good within us.
Thank you, Daisy. And here we are. We are going to now do a quiz, okay? The quiz is not mine, because who am I to do a quiz on good and evil? The quiz is for me too. It's for all of us, the students in the classroom who is not a student, right? We all are, and that's the joy of it all. So where are we going to find it? We go to the Spiritist Magazine. Yeah, go here, the website, spiritismagazine.org. And there we're going to find the very quiz. Where is it? It's going to be in issue. Hold on. I'm going there. 42. Yes, very special issue. 3 years ago, we coordinated together the youth event. And in this particular issue, if you click here, you see, if you go to the Spiritist Magazine website, you can go to the app in your phone. Yes, there is an app. Look how beautiful. Easy to find because it's red. Yeah, so we don't miss it, and then all the issues. And all you need to do is click, read in the tablet or in the computer. If you want to print out, you can print the PDF, but you can also order in the website. It goes to the link to a partner, MagCloud. There you go. It's not a subscription. You buy per issue. They deliver at your home, and you have a beautiful magazine like no other. And this is a magazine that you carry out to immortality, because nothing here is outdated. It's not like Vogue. It's not like, no, no, no. This is not out of fashion. There's nothing to do with fashion. It's about the laws of God. And when we go to this issue, we're going to find, let me just go here, click, go to the link. Ooh, let me see if it's opening. No, because it shows only that tab. But I'm opening the tab that I opened as you saw me clicking. And here we go, the PDF. Beautiful. Oh my Lord. And then we go, the message by Emmanuel, the half good. Because now we're talking about good and evil and questions. 642. You see, mark the question. 642. It's 6 equals to 4 plus 2. You'll never forget it. 642. That question is going to be ringing in our minds. Ling, 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 ling. Because Kardec asks, oh, what if we're not doing evil? Is that any problem? No. If we're not doing all the good we can, there's some evil that results from it, because it's the absence of the good. And the good that was left undone, our responsibility. And that's why we're reincarnated. That's why we have these family members. That's why we have these friends. That's why we're in this country, not the other, because that's where we need to go and do the good. Oh, but I wish I were. No, no, no. You wish to be where you are. You wish, and I wish to be with these people, because if we focus and do the good, check next grade, graduation, of course, after death, new life. But let's do the test, the half good, because we think we're doing so good, right? And Emmanuel comes and says, really? Let's check. So let us check together. Let me see if this is the one that is moving for you as well. I'm not going to read the message fully, because you can go to the magazine and read it yourself, okay? But let us then see some excerpts that may be questions for us. He says, often we come across those who admire the love towards the neighbor and who, without the courage to cut off the roots of self-attachment, indulge in activities of half-good, the half-good remaining involved in the movement of evil. What does he mean? Question number one, the quiz. When we lend valuable help to those who administrate something, but then we ask for favors, privileges. Is this really good or half good? Because often we think, oh, I'm helping. And then we go and expect something in return. Favors, privileges. There are people who help nonprofit organizations expecting their names are going to be on a plaque, that their names are going to be on a wall, is that a problem? Well, it's half good. Who knew about it? Huh? Emmanuel comes, takes Kardec's knowledge and go to another level. He says, if you left the good undone, it's half good, because you didn't fulfill it. You helped a little bit, but not fully, because you're asking for favors. How many times we do this in our homes? Believe it or not, we do something, sometimes our children are going to ask us, if I do this, what am I going to get? What I get. What do I get when I do laundry? What do I get when I do the dishes? A smile and a hug and a clean house and the happiness of having everything in order. That's what we get. Half good. If we don't train our children to give of themselves, they are going to grow into adults that are playing the half good. They give, but they want something in return. I'm going to stop helping those people because they don't give me much attention. Oh, yeah. Half good. Let's continue. Quiz number 2. I'm going to skip to the third paragraph here because we already talked about the donations. Now, we enter places of suffering, and there we give of ourselves, but then at the end we ask for concessions. The same, we visit a nursing home, and then they say, oh, but if you want to visit a nursing home, you need to do the whole process to prepare to volunteer, fill out the forms, background check. And then we are so good that we say, oh, that's too much. So complicated to help people. Where's the good? Oh, but I wanted to help, but we're not helping. And then when we help, we expect that people are going to bring red carpet to us. Oh, I entered the nursing home and I go there often. They didn't even say anything. They never sent me a card in gratitude. This is the half good. The next paragraph is going to ask us when we offer cooperation to other people's afflictions. Oh, you need my help. But then in return, I require special attention. I'm not reading to you what Emmanuel is saying that happens in that half good. But here he's stating to us, we're going to create embarrassments. Can you imagine? We go help somebody and then we expect that that person is going to give us special treatment because they helped us. What kind of good is that? Half good. So we need to go within and ask ourselves, are we really helping? Because we're expecting something in return, and then we are creating lots of tensions, maybe invisible to the eyes, but real in the spiritual life. Then we feed the needy and put burdens on their shoulders. Like, for example, in the United States, some people say, oh, Vanessa, it's so hard to help the homeless because they are not grateful. And then some who come from Brazil, they say, oh, it's so much easier to help in Brazil because people smile, or in Africa because they smile, they are grateful. So then what is this? It's not the good, it's half good, because then we are putting on the shoulders of people who need the burden of our request, of our attention. They need to be grateful. I remember in Baltimore, Maryland, when we were at the Spirit Side of Baltimore, we partnered with several organizations, and there was one organization, the Hope Shelter, that was only for women who were battered, and their children, right, Carlos? Thank you. Yeah, Carlos used to come too. And then with the group, we would organize ourselves, a wonderful group. But it wasn't easy. Man, they had no smile for us whatsoever. We would cook breakfast, bring to them beautiful, organic, fresh food. And not only they would not smile and be very rough, but some would not eat it. They would buy across the street something from KFC, McDonald's, and eat in front of us. We didn't care because imagine the situation they are living in. But a person came to me and said, Vanessa, it's so hard. They're not grateful. They don't smile. They go across the street and eat. My friend, what do you expect from them? That they are going to give us something? Aren't we the ones to give them something? And you think that we're giving the food? No, we're giving of ourselves. We're going to look at them and feel, man, this is so much suffering. They cannot even express a smile. We're going to stop because they are not expressing gratitude. That's half good. That's the half good. The people who do the half good, they welcome the less fortunate children. But then they use them to serve at their homes. It happens in so many countries. In Brazil, in other countries. I'm not so sure in the US. Maybe. I don't know. But in some countries, I know. Oh, let me help. I remember in some parts of Northeast of Brazil, there is this practice. The poor kids who are in the countryside, they are brought to the bigger cities by family members, relatives, etc. And they say, yeah, you can stay in my house, go to school, but you're going to be my free maid. I give you shelter and food, and this is so common. And they receive the help, but they are, is this good? Half good. Did you know that? We want more, 2 more. We have to. They praise companions so that these same companions may be a throne for them. It's when we say, oh, you're so loving, so caring, but I want you to say the same to me. So it's not true good. I'm praising people because I want to be praised. I want to appear to be so angelic and so good. Oh, you're this and that and the other. And I'm still waiting. How many people are going to come back and say, oh, you're adorable, you're this, and you're that. It's just illusion. Because then we discarnate, go to the spiritual realm, and there's silence. Oh, where the voice is telling me that I am good. Illusion, my friend. Illusions of the world. The half good. And the last. They protect friends by turning them into puppets and slaves. The people who are friends in addictions. I need my beer, but if you're my friend, you have to come with me. If you're my friend, you're going to go to hell with me because you're my friend. I am your friend, but you're my friend, and you come with me to my craziness. Some people think that that's the concept of friendship. It's the half good. We're not going to read the rest of the message, but the last paragraph. Because today, Karen Daisy, especially Daisy, was bringing to us the clarification about the good. Now, he finalizes this message by saying, in this way, let us be wary of the system of the half good, where evil insinuates itself, poisoning the source of good works. Half-built road causes accidents. Vipers enter the house through breaches. The good asks for total giving so that the good of all can be manifested in the world. That is why the good. Let me see if I can bring this a little bigger to all of us. That is why the good must be practiced with absolute self-disinterestedness and constant devotion, without it being lawful for us to claim any good. In our homes, in our daily lives, even with our family members. I'm going to say this to my mom because I know there are people who become older and they look at their children and they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to need them. So I no longer correct my children because I need them. I need their money. So they are making mistakes, but I'm not going to say anything because I need them. Is that evil? It's evil. We think we're doing something good, right? But it's full of self-interest. Where there is self-interest, selfishness, and pride, we fail. Did we pass the test? It's a test for all of us. We need to identify very seriously, as Emmanuel says here, we need to be fully aware of the system of the half good, where evil comes in. Why? Because if good is all there is, when it's half good, half of it is evil. So we need to do it to the fullest. I was talking to a friend today. She mentioned about Celia. And Carol brought the story of Celia. Let's wrap up with Celia in our minds. In the book, 50 years later, when Celia comes and shows us her sacrifice for the love of her mother, for loving her mother, she is out in the streets of Rome without any help. And then this friend wisely said she had God to sustain her. But God not external to her, inside of her heart. Because she had moral strength, mental strength that we said at the beginning, that we can only conquer when we have moral credibility. Sometimes we're going through afflictions and it's hard to go through them because we are not strong in our muscles. Chico Xavier used to say that to move the muscles of our soul and make them grow, we need to be charitable. We need to do the good. We need to surrender to the good completely. Sacrificing everything. Everything, including our health, like Kardec and Chico Xavier. They didn't measure. They were all full into that. There's no suicide when you dedicate your life to doing the good. Oh, but aren't you so tired? Great. The body is extenuated, working for the good. But the spirit is freer, stronger. So if we want to be built with the muscles of the soul, we need to do the good and only the good and nothing but the good. Right, friends? Talking about the good, Luciana is here, and she was in the other channel teaching the children about something good, right?
We were teaching about the good, exactly what we were learning with the adults. So we are having a phrase here for the kids saying that we reincarnate to love, to learn, and to help others. So this is like a wrap up and is coming hand to hand that we need to educate our children from the beginning to learn about Jesus, to learn the lessons that Jesus is bringing to us since we are children. Otherwise, we'll grow up and we'll be not able to put in practice all the teachings. So it's very important. And even when Daisy was talking about pride, and pride is something that blinds us so much that we cannot help the others. So we need to teach this to our children so they can help others and don't have this pride. Because in this little teaching of today about the wedding feast, we have this guy, this boy, running to be the first to take the best seat. But because of his pride, he ran over a lot of people. But he needs to learn how to be humble, don't have this pride, so he can actually follow Jesus as he's calling us to do the good, co-create with him all the time. Right, Virginia?
Uh-huh. And I wanted to show you guys my drawing.
Can you show it?
It's sun rays of love.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
says we practice.
You can read it.
It says we practice cooperation by doing things as a team and helping with Loopy. And Loopy just said, "I'm a handful."
Adorable. So see, yes, we help, we collaborate, right, Regina? This is the hard work for the family. And you can see we can all partake in this hard work and collaborate, put in practice all the teachings.
Yeah. Thank you, Miss Luciana, right?
Uh-huh.
And Miss Carol and Miss Daisy for bringing this lesson together on the behind the scenes with Luciana, right? So, friends, John the Rosa, he was the one who wrote to me this morning, I have to say, based on the previous 11 p.m. show when he said,
Let me say
you
it.
can-
Oh wait, I forgot.
love is in the air.
Love's in the air.
Because God
is love.
everywhere.
Is everywhere.
Remember?
I remember.
We loved it, John the Rosa. And today he's saying, let prayers be the only payment for doing the good. He matches the children's message today. And the good, only the good, but nothing but the good. Nothing but the good. Right, friends? So let us wrap up with a prayer. Carlos is ready for it. Thank you, Carlos, for helping us. We're ready for you here, joining the club.
The globe.
So, friends, let's close our eyes. And let's think about Jesus, our master. The master of our lives, the one who does not rest a second because he knows that we all need him so much that even us cannot understand how much we need him, but he knows, and he cares, and he is ready, and he's counting on all these wonderful elevated spirits to bring us the help we need when we need. So we must be close to him in thoughts and feeling so we can receive all this blessing that he sends to us. Let us stay in this wonderful, with this wonderful thoughts all through the week. Let us never forget that the good is the only way. Half good is not good enough. And not doing the good is moral suicide. Thank you, Lord, for everything you do for us, and so be it.
Wow. What What a message, huh? What a message in the final prayer, too, for us. Moral suicide. Let us meditate on this, right? And we decide to seek the good. To
Like the logo says, seek the good and
feel the good,
and
visualize the good, and mold it with all the resources we have at hand. Mold the good, right?
mold it like Play-Doh
Like Play-Doh, the
And
Play-Doh of
slime,
God.
and
slime.
and putty.
Yeah. Thank you, friends. We'll see you next Friday, God willing. Bye.